Let's have a round of applause for Phase 7. Hi, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. We hope that you all enjoyed it. We had some interesting panel sessions directly before that, and we know that as they were simultaneously, you weren't able to be in all of them. So we have the opportunity now. My colleagues are going to rejoin me and present what came out of their panel sessions, what the debates were, what the findings were. So please give a warm welcome now to my colleagues, Monica Jones, Christopher Springate, and Peter Craven.
Thank you, Sarah. So it's the ladies' first approach you've been taking. Hello, everyone. I was panel 2, so I leave the floor to Peter.
Panel 1, Global Digitalisation, Harnessing the Potential for Growth and Employment. It was actually in this space here, it was a very, very fiery debate, and it's very difficult sometimes to sort of keep up. I think we could have gone for another hour and a half with the panelists going hammer and tongs at each other. And there were questions from the floor, which were very interesting. They were the panel focused on the debate about creating jobs and what kind of jobs. It was quite quickly agreed at the beginning that it's basically Blanca Trevino from Softec in Mexico said that it's basically a fundamental human right that people have high-speed, high-level connectivity, broadband connectivity worldwide. It was agreed that that's something that everybody in Germany has a right to indeed. But then we moved on quickly from that to talk about the nature of jobs that can be created in the digital economy. And it was very much a debate that was influenced by the German approach to doing business in the last many years in the social market economy with the small and medium-sized enterprises, the much cherished Mittelstand here in Germany. Can that kind of practice still continue in the digital world? And it was pretty much agreed that in a modified form, perhaps it can in the foreseeable future, but really that kind of thinking is likely to be washed away. And even a liberal-spirited figure like Konstantin von Orania-Nassau, he said it is a hard fact that you need to do all you can in terms of infrastructure, in terms of funding, in terms of education, skills building and innovation to keep ahead of the rest, and then you've got a chance of creating satisfying regular jobs for people, but only then. That was very much the tenor of the discussion. And it was very interesting. Two of the people in the panel were Matthias Machnik from the Economics Ministry, who were hosting the event, and Dieter Gorni from the German music industry, both very sort of liberal-spirited, sort of more traditional, social democrat-minded Germans, both of them conceding that basically there's going to be very much a rearguard action in trying to protect the traditional industries that have made Germany so strong for so long in engineering and areas like that, but that Germany is going to have to develop in the digital field much quicker than it already is. We talked a little bit about education and what a problem it is in Germany and in other parts of the world, that there isn't enough education. We heard this morning the comment that you are very lucky indeed at a German school if you have a teacher who knows their IT. That was very much an aspect of the debate. And yeah, and I asked Konstantin von Orania-Nassau to talk about the countries that are doing best of all, which are setting the benchmark, setting the level for competition. He mentioned Korea, Singapore, the UK, and Estonia. So we had very much a philosophical debate, as I say, about old, very sort of German, European, Northern European models for doing business and the modern digital approach, which is two very different worlds. And they clashed in the debate, and it was very fiery and it was very emotional. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I would say that panel 2, which was covering the topic of digitizing production for the future and harmonizing norms and standards, was quite emotional too, in some respect. Certainly we found out that norms and standards and digitizing production are two sides of the same coin. The first thing that I found very interesting is that we learned from Sara Roversi, who is the co-founder of the UNCTAD group and the future food industry, is that standardization, standards and norms don't just apply to your normal factories with robotics in there and manufacturing of the traditional kind, but it goes all the way to what ends up on your plate, namely your food. So that I thought was very interesting. What was also interesting to learn, and I think that was fairly new, is what Gunther Kegel, who is the president of the VDA Association and the CEO of Peppel and Fuchs, a German medium-sized family-owned business, he said that standards changed very much since digitalization. And obviously standards have been around all the time, but they've changed dramatically because now the approach is that first, you agree on a standard or standards, and that can take time. You need a bit of patience and cooperation, and only then the new technology is ready to be implemented. So that was an interesting approach, and that is an approach that is basically synonymous with Industry 4.0 and autonomous driving as well. Another finding, which doesn't come as a surprise as we're talking about data, standards know no borders. And we're talking about no borders between various sectors, between SMEs and multinational companies, or, of course, the traditional borders between countries. There was also a point brought up by Professor Dr. Boris Otto from the Fraunhofer Institute for Software and Systems Technology, and that is that the Industrial Revolution, and there was a question mark whether we should call it a revolution or whether it is just a development, that it is a global phenomenon that is happening everywhere as we speak at the same time. So that is fairly new in the history of humanity because it offers a huge opportunity that we can shape this future together, but also a great challenge because it has to be shaped everywhere together in order for it to work. The challenge is that obviously the G20 aren't equally developed. We're talking about different political and socio-economical frameworks, skills, infrastructure, and so forth, probably similar to what Peter in his panel touched upon. Digitalization enables rapid innovation, and that requires cooperation. We're talking about cross-company cooperation between multinationals and startups. That was a point that Gerhard Baum, the Chief Digital Officer of Schaeffler, brought up. And he put it that he said the companies need a new DNA, a new approach, which leads right to the next point. What happens to a company USP? Of course, we all want to have the edge over others in order to get the right profit, the right market access. So what happens to USP? And the answer here was that standards, the cooperation of standards is not contradictory to USP. Quite the contrary, you can access a new market, you get together access to perhaps a bigger market, which is the idea, and it is there where your service or your product can then offer your particular unique USP, which gives you the success that you hopefully want and aim for. There was a big discussion coming from Joe Batia from ANSI in the United States, who obviously promoted open, voluntary, market-driven standards versus governmental regulatory guidelines and policies, which were touched upon by Minister Zypries this morning. And we found out, though initially the two seemed contradictory, they don't have to be. Actually, they can go hand in hand. However, I have to admit that when it came to the right mix between the two, we have not yet arrived at a solution. So I'm sure that there has to be a bit more talk about that. Very important, and that was one of the quite interesting interventions we had from the floor, was the point that we need to talk to all the stakeholders. Now, the panel consisted of industry representatives and representatives of standard organizations, so those experts, but there wasn't a representative of any public institution or organization, and that was pointed out. So we need to talk to everyone, and that includes the public, it includes public organizations. Digital divide was touched upon as well. And I'm sure that Christopher will have a bit more on that with his panel. And last but not least from my side, and I think that is something that we should take home, standardization is fun. That was news to me, but I think we can live with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. Okay, so my panel, the third panel, last but not least, was about encouraging transparency and creating confidence in the digital world. And I'd like to start at the end of our panel with a little anecdote. A fine gentleman who is a key organizer of this conference came up to me and whispered in my ear, "The minister is waiting for your panelists." We were running over time, so I'd just like to take this opportunity. I know the minister isn't with us right now, but anybody who is in her team, please relay my sincere apologies. The reason we ran over time is because I had such a fantastic panel. They're sitting over there in the second and third rows. I'll be mentioning them by name, and we, both the audience and I, were absolutely gobsmacked, if you understand that old English word, by their intelligence, expertise, their openness. And now I'll take you back to the beginning of the panel. We started by me essentially admitting that I was a digital immigrant. I still am, and that a lot of this progress, which is so astonishingly fast, which has gone beyond our comprehension in terms of the exponential growth of computing capacity, that it has created in me, and I think in many of us, an unease, a discomfort about what this is all about. There's a part of it is euphoria at the speed of progress, and the other part is, how do we deal with this? There's so many open questions. So my first question to the panel was, what makes you uneasy about the brave new digital world? And I'm just going to read you little bits and pieces from the notes that have been so kindly provided to me by my unofficial rapporteur, Niels Bernsen of the Economics Ministry. He's right over there. Thank you very much for this. So one of the things that we together noted, I'm being a little bit freelance with the truth there. We had Carlos López Blanco, who is from Telefónica in Spain, talking about the internet. Remember, this is the answer to the question, what makes you uneasy? The internet is no longer a naive space. It used to be that space for nerds and for geeks, and it no longer is like that. We had John Frank, Vice President at Microsoft, identifying one problem for him and for his company. I assume that politicians perceive problems at the national level, but the solutions, certainly for the digital world, are need to be on an international scale. We had Pam Dixon from the World Privacy Forum, there she is over in the corner, telling us that she's afraid of the political use of technology. We had Gert Billen, who's sitting right here, the State Secretary at Germany's Justice and Consumer Protection Ministry. A very interesting point. He said, we're entering a phase where we talk not only about technology, but more about responsibility. And that's very much the direction that our panel then took. And he also took the position of the consumer. A leading German newspaper once said, few people understand German consumers as well as Gert Billen. So he took that perspective for us. And very simple thought, I ask myself, as a consumer, whether I can trust the company whose products I'm using on the internet. And that took us right to the heart of the issue. How trustworthy is the internet? How can we increase that trust? We had Bertrand de la Chapelle from Internet and Jurisdiction, again talking similarly to John Frank. The problems are international, but the tools are still national, and pleading as a multi-stakeholder enthusiast, pleading for us to adopt the multi-stakeholder approach. We all know that no actor can find a solution on his or her own. We need cooperation frameworks. And then we had Kathy Brown, who's the head of the Internet Society, talking about the Global Internet Survey, in which her organization found a great deal of unease, a great deal of anxiety, and one of the key findings, the most important issue is trust. And also making an appeal on our panel, which received quite a bit of applause from the audience, to make encryption of data, encryption of communication, the norm, not the exception. So that was, that's giving you an idea of how we started. We talked a lot about digital security. And my feeling, you must realize this is subjective, so allow me to be subjective. My feeling was that the private sector on our panel, so John Frank of Microsoft, Carlos López Blanco of Telefónica, were moving, or are moving, and I think that's probably true of quite a large part of the private sector, towards recognizing that there is an issue of trust and that without trust, their customers will go. So, and this took us in the direction of who owns our data. You'll remember Sir Tim Berners-Lee a few weeks ago said we have lost control of our personal data, so we were discussing how can we regain that control. Carlos López Blanco of Telefónica was talking about empowering customers, finding adapting to customers' needs. He talked about different types of customers, digital introverts, like me, digital extroverts with different needs as far as privacy is concerned, for instance. Then we talked about something that was quite interesting. John Frank of Microsoft talked about an idea that Microsoft is involved with called, well, the idea is to go in the direction of a digital Geneva Convention with 3 pillars. The first pillar having norms for governments in terms of how they deal with data, another pillar norms for the private sector, and the third pillar, particularly interesting, setting up an international agency that receives data on cyber attacks along the lines of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the idea being that governments tend to be restrictive about the information they give us about cyber attacks because it affects national security. The private sector is also not keen to reveal what cyber attacks have been happening because, of course, it affects their commercial interests. So that data goes to an independent international agency, which then works scientifically on attributing the cyber attack. So a digital Geneva Convention, that was a takeaway. And of course, that is a multi-stakeholder approach. We had Gerd Billen mentioning that here in Germany there is a Cyber Security Council, which looks in particular at protecting key sectors in terms of their cybersecurity. He talked about the European idea of digital security labels. We had also Bertrand de la Chapelle talking about the multi-stakeholder approach, but pointing out that it is a difficult path to take. It's difficult to achieve consensus at the national level. Doing it at the international level is even harder. But the consensus I felt of the panel was that there is no other way of addressing a global phenomenon, an international phenomenon as the internet is, without the multi-stakeholder approach. In terms of privacy, the key acronym, if you want, is GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is coming into force in the European Union next year, a supranational body. So an example of international cooperation working. And that brought us again to the issue of trust. John Frank of Microsoft saying, very simple sentence, without trust we have no customers. For him, GDPR, a major step in the right direction. We had Cathy Brown again referring to survey results showing that there is a lack of trust everywhere. I think government and the media have lost a lot of trust. But also NGOs and the private sector, and that there is this feeling, and now I'm coming back to where I started, of a loss of control over our data. And then, if I might just finish with some words from Gerd Billen. We were also talking about data. Is it a commodity? probably is effectively a commodity at the moment. But Carlos López Blanco was making the point, data is not oil. And Gert Billen very strongly said it's not a commodity. Data is a human right. And that, yes, data can be used, but it needs to be based on a fair deal. And there needs to be much more ownership on the side of the individual. At the moment, we don't really own our own data. And I'll end on one sentence that you said, people possibly have to learn to share less data. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much to my colleagues. Let's give them another round of applause.
Thank you.
All set.
Do you want us to do that dance we rehearsed?
Oh, yeah. Maybe later. It's time now for our second keynote of the day. We're going to be joined now by a man who has the rare distinction of having a law named after him. He also happens to be the chairman and the CEO of Gurría Telecom. And about that law that I'm talking about, he's led the charge to develop the flash memory chips inside all of our smartphones and made the singular achievement of doubling the memory chip density each year for nearly a decade. Soon they will be so small they might just simply disappear. It is called Hwang's Law. Well, now he is taking telecommunications innovation to the next level, and his keynote today is titled How KT is Leveraging Core Assets to Bring Needed Change in the Face of the Fourth Industrial Revolution that Minister Zypries has mentioned is called Industry 4.0 here in Germany. So please, without any further ado, join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Chang-Gyu Hwang.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guten Tag. Good afternoon. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chang-Gyu Hwang, CEO of the Gurría Telecom, and it is great pleasure and honor to give a keynote at the prestigious G20 Multi-Stakeholder Conference. Thank you very much for having me here today. Before we begin, allow me to speak briefly about the company I represent. KT is Korea's largest telecommunications business that has led the history of ICT development in Korea more than 130 years. I will make a long story short and show you this video clip.
In 1885, the beginning of KT was the beginning of modern telecommunications in South Korea. KT has been leading South Korea's telecommunications from landlines to cellular phones, internet, and smartphones. KT opens up the era of Gigatopia to provide greater valuable services based on the network. At 2018 Pyeongchang, KT will unveil the world's first 5G services. Users will experience more stunning and immersive services at any time and anywhere based on the 5G network service. The 5G network will connect all devices and across all borders. With this powerful network, all businesses and enterprises will be able to develop their business and find new opportunities. KT leads the fourth industrial revolution based on the network. This revolution will contribute to all of humankind through advances in education, energy, and medicine. The power of network. Gurría Telecom.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Through years of the hard work and dedication to technological advancement, we have gained recognition in business community. And I am especially proud to share that Harvard Business School chose to publish a case study on our achievements and future ambitions. Through these efforts, we hope to create real progress for a better world. And that brings us to Germany today. Germany is a very special place to me because it's the country that taught me and inspired me the most when I was serving as Chief Technology Officer of Korea. I had the privilege of visiting Europe's largest research organization, Planov, and meetings with the German's hidden champions. Let me develop a unique Korean model of our own. And what better place to discuss industrial revolution than Germany? I'm pretty sure we are all familiar with the term. The first industrial revolution used steam power. The second, electricity. The third, computers. Now, we are on the brink of the fourth industrial revolution. It is digital revolution and that of ICT innovations. The World Economic Forum characterized it by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres. The phase of transformation is only increasing, and it is expected to result in most significant and profound change. In fact, it is going to be 3,000 times more powerful, posing an opportunity, but also a threat and even fear. Given the current stagnant economy, improved productivity could lead to a decrease in jobs, fall of small and medium businesses, extreme polarization of the power in the world. But evolution is inevitable, and the fourth industrial revolution is, of course, part of it. Today, I'd like to speak about new opportunities and challenges facing humanity while making fourth industrial revolution valuable and effective for all. Let's take a moment and ask ourselves a question. What is the key elements of the fourth industrial revolution? Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence, robots, augmented reality or virtual reality, and many others. As these new technologies continue to converge with the industries, the public services productivity will increase, and our lives will change dramatically. Siemens, for example, has seen a huge decrease in errors by incorporating IoT and big data into its electronics plants in Hamburg, Germany. Moscow, smart traffic monitoring and control systems contribute to solving traffic problems. And we are seeing the advent of connected car technology. However, from a telecommunication company's point of view, the key element is connectivity. The common denominator for these new innovations is connection. They would not exist without it. Processing the information from IoT sources requires connection to central server, and so do AI and VR. When combined with the high capacity and zero latency of 5G network, connectivity becomes even more powerful. Only real-time analysis and computing of the big data that is produced through peoples and things connected to the network make VR, AR, and other new applications fully functional. That is why telecommunication as an industry is advancing the development of 5G. As Ms. Claudia Nemeth highlighted in her keynote earlier today, Deutsche Telekom is making every effort to launch 5G in Germany, and so is KT. We announced at recent Mobile World Congress, KT will bring world's first 5G network to the market in 2019 and become the first 5G operator worldwide. KT is taking right steps toward achieving our ambitious plans. We are working with global partners shown in here to develop the standards for 5G and creating 5G services with the leading telecom giant in US, Verizon, based on these standards. As part of it, we recently held a realistic three-dimensional holographic conference call on the 5G trial network that connected Korea and United States. Ladies and gentlemen, 5G will power the fourth industrial revolution, just like steam, electricity, computers did in the past. It will reshape all industries. Take media, for example. KT is preparing the world's first 5G experience at the upcoming Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang. Here is a preview of what it will look like. Amazing. Thank you. You have just seen a whole new paradigm of media, where you will be able to enjoy the games from an athletic perspective and get a live experience as if you were playing on the same field. You could even stop the clock and check every detail. This is just a start. Our objective is to take 5G to the next level. And we are doing this by adding intelligence to our network. Let me share some more examples. This is our everyday GPS, we all use it, right? But did you know its output is normally off by 10 meters outdoor and 30 meters indoors? And because it is 2D map, it can't tell the exact location. This is KT Giga 3D locator. With highly advanced GPS technology and KT's unique location asset shown in this slide, it reduces the error to less than just 1 meter and provides three-dimensional location data. Our Giga 3D locator will change every aspect of our lives. Upon the receiving an emergency call, it will immediately detect and show exactly which floor of the building the caller is. We also developed IoT-enabled life jacket shown in here. It inflates automatically when it hits water and delivers the exact location and the whole weight of the victim to the control tower for a swift rescue. Think of location intelligence on a high-capacity, zero-latency 5G network. When combined with the big data and artificial intelligence, it will give us the power to achieve what is impossible with today's technology. We may be able to prevent fire and see less victims. Here is another scene in the 5G era. The sky filled with drones and the street full of connected cars. This could trigger unexpected consequences from time to time. For drones that have already been unfortunate incidents worldwide, with more of them in the air, this mishap will increase. We need to take measures. Fortunately, there is network intelligence. KT has developed a network-based control technology that sets virtual perimeter to limit access or make a forced landing. Once drones and cars are connected to a network in the 5G era, everything will be under control. Safety is assured with our orchestration capability. In addition, KT is constantly exploring and developing impactful new intelligent features in our network. Network security, big data, artificial intelligence, the list goes on. We believe the intelligent 5G network and the fourth industrial revolution can make a difference in people's life and create a better world. Ladies and gentlemen, we are faced with serious challenges. Low growth, low employment rate, aging population, rising healthcare and welfare spending, pollution, epidemics, even terrorism. Our network and the intelligence features can offer a solution. You are not just saying it. We have actually done it. We are reducing energy use with KT Micro Energy Grid, intelligent energy management platform, This contributes to cost savings for companies, environmental improvement, and sustainable growth. KT-MEC offers a unique end-to-end solutions for energy productions, consumption, and transaction. It gathers huge load of data from the weather, temperature indoor, to gas, electricity, heat usage patterns, and implements machine learning technology to provide cutting-edge energy cost reduction solutions. At 18 sites in Korea last year, we cut energy cost by 61% on average. If this were applied to just 10% of Korea, we could save so much energy to replace 8 nuclear power plants. Another global concern is microdust. Recently, with the government, KT launched an air quality monitoring and management service. We tracked the air quality indoors and outdoors by time, location, and the seasons to identify the origin and the cause of pollution. Based on the findings, we are planning on working with the government and meteorologists to find the real solution. We are also utilizing ICT assets and the solutions for disadvantaged populations in remote areas. This is KT, Digital Inclusion Project, called GigaStory, on the philosophy that ICT should benefit everyone. We have established 5 chapters in Korea to improve safety, education, travel, health, and culture based on our advanced Giga infrastructure. Starting this year, we are expanding this story overseas. The first chapter unfolds in Bangladesh, presenting opportunities for better education, health, and economy. Ladies and gentlemen, today, KT is here not for just a telecommunications company, but a global ICT leader, accountable for inclusive growth worldwide. Unlike first, second, third industrial revolutions that resulted in unequal distribution of benefits, the fundamental changes of the fourth industrial revolution should benefit the whole society. Our job is to ensure that is done responsibly. With that said, we would like to propose one action that can be taken immediately. The fourth industrial revolution will offer new approach to social problems. Through our achievements and experience, we have turned what was simply an imagination into realistic project for better life. We have found that telcos can contribute to stopping the spread of infection by using roaming information. We are currently working with UN Global Compact to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 3, good health and well-being. This video clip gives a quick overview.
Infectious disease is one of the biggest challenges facing the planet. We need to find ways to stop the spread. KT discovered that roaming data offers a way out. Utilizing critical travel pattern information contained in roaming data, we can identify if someone visited affected areas. So KT built a system that collects and transfers roaming data to Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which then alerts individual travelers to take appropriate preventive measures. This system contributes to systematically controlling the spread of infectious diseases. Last year, KT implemented the system in Korea and signed an MOU with the UN Global Compact to take this system globally. Today, we encourage telecommunications companies and partners around the world to join our efforts to protect humanity from infectious diseases.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Simple, it may seem, but this impact is exponential. ICT is solving global problems. But this is something we cannot achieve alone. We are now at the point where we have to take these efforts to the next level. On top of the support from the UN Global Compact, we need support from governments worldwide to make further progress. To that end, we call for G20 to join our efforts today by making this initiative a G20 project. We ask that you play a leading role in bringing together governments and industry leaders. It is our firm belief that this will become an exemplary model of how the fourth industrial revolution benefits humanity. I'm very confident that together with the G20, we will be able to turn this into success simply and sustainably. Collaboration between governments and ICT stakeholders will turn the fourth industrial revolution into opportunity for mankind. Isn't this worthwhile enough to invest in? Today, we invite you to join us in building a better world for all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause, please, for Dr. Chang-Gyu Hwang. Inspirational. It's so interesting. You know, we've been talking a lot today about the challenges that are being posed by digitalization. It's also important to remember that there's also a lot of good that can come out of it with the right policies and the right corporate visions as well. You'll notice things moving a little bit behind me. That's because we're just setting up now for our minister's talk, one of the highlights of the day. We've been talking again about challenges, opportunities. Now we're going to talk about policy. And we have the great fortune of having the representation from the current G20 presidency, that is, of course, Germany, and the next G20 presidency, that is Argentina, who will assume that role in December. So with that, I think it would be okay to begin inviting some people on the stage. Let's bring back on our host now, the German Minister for Economic Affairs and Energy, Brigitte Zypries. You can sit, please, to my left. And I mentioned also the next G20 presidency. We can invite onto the stage Clarisa Estol. Her title is Secretary of Investment Promotion at the Ministry of Communications of Argentina. And today we're also going to get the development perspective, and that will come from Mukhisa Kituyi, Secretary General of UNCTAD. That is a UN organization which is focused on developing and underdeveloped countries. He's going to give us the development lens, so please invite him onto the stage. Thank you. And we have the Secretary General of the OECD, Gurría, is also joining us. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you. And Minister Zypries, just to get the conversation going, I'd like to ask all of our panelists one question, because we're heading into this ministers' meeting, which is kicking off later tonight. How do all of you see the G20's role with regard to digitalization, and how hopeful are you that your concerns will be addressed? And I'll begin with the current G20 presidency.
Well, I think the discussions today so far gives us quite some hope, some even more hope than we had before in all the progress to come here. I mean, the progress we did is already some months, of course, and it's so-called somehow finalizing today with the agreement we hopefully set up tomorrow. As far as I know, it's not actually finished, but almost, really, nearly. Since they are sitting here, it can't be that hard. And this shows us that we get on quite well, and that the challenges we focus in the G20 are seen by every country in the same way. And that's what I think something really good to point out. We always have to remember it's the first meeting in this way, and it just means we are starting a process, and you're going to take it over.
And are there any initiatives that you have seen, for example, from Germany, that Argentina might continue?
I think that already we've heard too much that this is a complex world we're living, and the thing is we cannot do it alone. So I think that the best thing that the G20 brings is the brains of everybody to work to see together. And we all know that there are some differences, but we have to look for common denominators. We have to look for the things that we agree on. There are many that we don't agree, but we have to work on those that we agree. And there are certain ones, like education, for example, and so we can work together on what we agree instead of spending the time arguing about what we don't agree. And there's an African proverb, I think, that says, if we want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So I guess that should be the motto.
Okay. Secretary Gurría, how hopeful are you going into this meeting?
Very hopeful. We've been working with the G20 from the inception. I was actually one of the founders of the original G20, which are finance ministers and governors of central banks only. And by the way, nobody knows that there were only 19. We never got the 20th. We could never agree on the 20th. And so we launched it and said, okay, nobody will notice, let's launch it. And then of course, we have many other countries participating. So now the number is not the problem anymore. The question is the effectiveness. And this is the kind of issue that goes from managing a crisis, which was the origin of the G20, to now managing the great challenges of modernity and managing opportunities. Digital has to be seen as an opportunity because it can be a threat for certain kinds of the work, for certain parts of the workforce, for the low-skilled, for example. How do you turn it into an opportunity so that when you're talking about, like our friend from KT was saying, when you're talking about education, and when you're talking about health, and when you're talking about development, when you're talking about growth, and skills, skills, skills. You know, how do you make the most out of the potential for which you really have to upgrade, upskill, reskill the whole of the workforce? And it works well when you do it nationally, but 1 + 1 is 5 when it comes to international, because when you do it collectively and when you have certain common points both of departure and when there is a mutually reinforcing feature, as there is with the G20, precisely to find those common threats, those common grounds. This is when then you have a potentially, you know, explosive opportunity. And this is what we're trying to capture. This enormous potential, this enormous opportunity, when all the KTs and when all the policy side, on the policy side, not just the operators, but on the policy, then you really can imagine an enormous world of what is going to be a better world, it's going to be an improvement, but also it's going to go over those things that today are becoming in, you know, this backlash against globalization that we're saying, etc. We can rescue that and really make a better deal out of globalization itself, which, among others, will also help us to rescue the trust of our populations, which is one of the great casualties of the crisis. Digital allows us to do that, and the G20 is a place where we gather not everybody, but a very large part of the population, a very large part of the trade, a very large part of investment flows, a very large part of financial flows, and therefore representative enough that we can get the best practices out of there.
And Dr. Kituyi, I saw you nodding your head from time to time when Secretary Gurría was speaking. Where do you see the opportunities, and what do you see as the role of the G20, especially within this development lens that you have?
Well, thank you very much. Just to start off from where Gurría left off, the first thing we want to appreciate about the digital challenge and opportunity is how not to repeat the mistakes of globalization, where those of us who saw the value of global engagement ignored or dismissed the concerns of those who felt alienated by globalization until it translated into a political flood that we started treating it as something serious. That the digital inclusion is important to be built into the architecture of digital development. And that means not only identifying what are the challenges, but how do we scale up the positive practices that are experienced. This calls for a number of things. First of all, addressing the digital divide, not just in the fiscal infrastructure, in the legislative and regulatory frameworks, but even in the deficit of knowledge and priority. I have an occasion to say e-commerce is like literacy. Those who least have it, least appreciate its value. And they don't even reflect it in their national priorities. So helping those who are being left behind to appreciate what they're not having is an important challenge. It's for developing countries particularly important that transit countries are a major concern for hinterland countries that may be interested in getting hooked on international e-commerce platforms. So across border issues, regional commitments, and international solidarity. That's one level. The second level, which is very important as a driver, G20 is a driver of the global recovery from the flat growth of the past 10 years. And if you look at the statistics of digital economy, since 2013 to 2016, global e-commerce grew from $16 trillion to $22 trillion. That's a growth that's about 7 times the growth of global trade. So this bright spot can be an engine of pulling the global trade out of its morose performance. But to do that, this is a time that the G20 has to get it right. What inclusion? How to listen to the skeptics, which we've not been doing. I mean, if you saw in Davos, the sense of a mea culpa, you know, you have been looking the other way, ignoring critics about those who are being left behind. Civil society will play an important role. Academia will play an important role. Genuine engagement with the entrepreneurs, both in the definition of how to regulate and in identifying socially agreeable targets is going to be critically important for a viable long-term path for the digital economy. Thank you.
And this whole question of the digital divide, especially as it relates to globalization, that actually leads perfectly into a question that one of you posed on Twitter. It was posed by Julie Teagland, and she wanted to ask it to you, Minister Zypries, so I'll pose it to you. She asked, how can globalization be fair, leveraging both digital and fair trade?
Well, as a matter of fact, I think that for the developing countries, digitalization is a very great chance, because there are some steps on the developments which you just can overjump. If you see what in Africa, for instance, is going with fintech things already, I mean, we in Germany are not far as on this way. So it's, I think, for yeah, well, the development gives a great chance to, the digitization gives a great chance for the developing country, I think. And we have to use it in a proper way, of course. First of all, as I said this morning already, we have to make sure that everybody gets the opportunity to use it. So that means we need the KT and others to serve us with the Datenleitung, was heißt das jetzt? Okay, infrastructure. Yeah. That's what we need, and of course we do need education, and we have to make sure that everybody gets a chance to use it. And if you do that, you find a tremendous amount of startups in the African countries. Whenever I'm on my way in Africa, I look for startups, and it's always amazing what you find. So I think we just have to make sure that this process continues and gets more money from the G20 into this process as well, and see that we continue.
And this is a message that we've heard reiterated time and time again, especially within the German G20 presidency, is that no one should really be left behind here. When we're talking about no one, who are we talking about? Are we talking about, you know, people who need to be trained for new skills? Are we talking about development? What are we talking about? Where is that initiative being directed?
Well, it's directed to the people, of course, and to the different parts, like the way how we work. Don't let any,
so new skills, new training, perhaps for groups that might feel disadvantaged by the process. I understand that Argentina, do you also have initiatives in that regard?
Yeah, I think that, you know, to your question of who is the one that's not to be left behind is nobody. You know, the individuals, the small and medium-sized companies, everybody. Because I think that, again, coming back to the globalization and the opposition the globalization had, a lot of it has to be, has to deal with fear. And fear comes from not knowing. And that's what we have to educate. And the education is the only way out. And I think that it's hard because education takes time. It takes generations to be educated. So we have to have patience. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that we have to educate and teach the teachers. Because if the teachers are the oppositions and the ones that are opposite to, you know, to getting the education and the technological education to students, then we cannot get there. So I guess that a lot of it has to do with teaching the teachers and being patient and getting education down the line for everybody.
And Secretary Gurría, you know, in that regard, with regard to education, training people, new skills, are there any cases that we know of where a country or institutions are really getting it right at the moment?
Well, I recently visited India, for example, and they started by, you know, making sure that everybody was identified. They've since created 270 million bank accounts additional in order to get, because of course they're using the technology in order to make the terminals, the whole operating basis. They worked a lot on cost in terms of reducing enormously the infrastructure and the actual terminals that people use, etc. They've also worked on the access, and then you work on the quality. These are the three things you got to make sure. And basically, I think what the minister said about leapfrogging, you just move forward without having to wait for decades and decades and decades, as happened in the countries in more developed countries, that we just had to wait for many decades for this to happen, for this to be generalized. Today there are hundreds of millions of users in a country where, again, there's been a qualitative jump into modernity because of the access to the technology. But then you take it to a very well-developed country, let's say Germany. The original diagnosis that we did was to say, okay, how is, of course, they're masters in high productivity and high competitiveness in terms of manufacturing. But then they identified that perhaps their services were not up to the same type of productivity and the same type of modernity, the same type of competitiveness. But add the two things together, 50% of the value added of manufactured exports in Germany are services. Services. So, because you don't export cars, you export code with wheels, So, what happens? If you're not very good at the services, if you're not as productive and as competitive with the services, then, of course, that can threaten the success of your manufacturing base. And this is precisely one of the things that we're trying to do here today, and that we're trying to do throughout, and that is to use these wonderful advances, this progress, the technology, the digital, and not, by the way, not all the technology is digital and not all the progress is digital, but we use it almost like synonymous. But in order to what? Well, precisely to catch up. You have sectors which have to catch up, and this is the great beauty. This is why the mission and the vision, the ambition of the work that can be done here at the level of the G20 on digital in particular is so promising, is so pregnant with possibilities, because it can really level the playing field.
Let's talk a little bit more about leveling that playing field. And I just want to quote a statistic, actually, that I believe came from the OECD before I ask my next question to Dr. Kituyi, because something like 4 billion people around the world, 60% of the population, are not even connected to the internet at all. So we're having this conversation really for only 40% of the population, and that's assuming that they have a network that is high speed enough for them to really take advantage of it. Of course, we don't have 5G yet, but maybe eventually. What do you need from the G20? What does the developing world need from the G20?
Okay, first of all, is to appreciate initiatives which have worked in the developing countries. And how can
Such as?
I can give example of M-Pesa. I was Minister of Trade of Kenya when at cabinet level we made a decision. We didn't know all the consequences, but we were ready to open up for the possibility of electronic money. We became the first country in the world, and today the most successful country in the world in mobile money. 85% of the population, of the adult population, is financially included because their mobile phone is the wallet. Now, what has it meant? It has meant a woman farmer who for generations has been toiling, and the proceeds of her labor are paid onto the account of her husband because he owns the title from which the crop is produced, now receives payment for her labor onto her mobile phone. It has exponential value for the family. It has meant also market intelligence is accessible for the rural producer. You know the average market price of your produce. You cannot be cheated by the middleman the way it's been done before. Now, what does that mean? help those who can use similar possibilities to see what is possible, to scale it up in other areas. There's a second thing. It is true the statistics are not very exciting. Today, as we speak, a European is 30 times more accessible to fixed broadband than an African. Today, 75% of Europeans do their trading on electronically. The best practices in the developing world, that's coming from Thailand, South Africa, and Kenya, is 5%. Helping to build infrastructure, fiscal, regulatory, and political, to prioritize a coherent policy of ICT at the center of development planning is critically important. One of the other areas which I could finish with, we at the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development had a major conference last July where we launched globally a program called E-Trade for All, where together with 19 other leading international organizations, 25 large corporations, including telecom companies, identify the specific target intervention points. How do we help to build the infrastructure? How do we design framework legislation for cyber protection and fight war against cybercrime? How do we help with the logistics of return goods for electronic trading? Identify real problems. That's the only way you can identify genuine solutions. But also importantly, knowing that technology alone is not enough for inclusive use of a technology. That's why I say one of the weaknesses of our design of globalization over the past 20 years was up-down. And if you include consumer groups, civil society, and small enterprises in the design of solutions, and down-upward solution, you reduce the alienation that has bedeviled globalization.
And that's a really interesting point to then turn to the next G20 presidencies. I mean, I'll begin with you, Secretary Estol. Do you see some opportunities in that approach?
I definitely see so, and I want to stress that the 4 billion that you mentioned, they're not the problem of the underdeveloped countries only, because as we know, connectivity has a network effect. So the more people that are connected, and it's better for everybody. So it's not only our problems in the least developed countries. And I think that we have to understand, and all the countries have to understand, the positive externalities of connecting all those 4 billion people. And that's where we have to work together, understanding that by our collaborative work, we're all going to benefit.
In order to get to that point, though, to benefit, there has to be trust in the system, and that is something that really is a major issue. We heard about it in one of our panels that was conducted today. Minister Zypries, what do you see as the G20's role in promoting trust?
I think that it's very important that the G20 agree on standards for connectivity between the systems, that everybody can take its data when he wants to change. Nobody probably wants to leave Kituyi, but just in case. And take the data with them, and that it's clear that everybody at least gets an idea about what is about data security and knows about Verbraucherschutz, consumer protection. Knows what kind of rights he has and what he can do, and that there is a consumer protection office where he can go to and ask for and gets help and gets what they help them to in front of the court, for instance. That's something we did in Germany to do.
And Germany, so of course. Sorry.
Yes, Germany, of course, has quite a high standard of data protection, and data protection is a great issue in Germany. Also, sometimes people go with their own data quite without sorrows and put a lot in the internet, where we always mention that it would be better not to do that. But that's a question of education as well. So. But for the state, I think it's necessary to make clear that there is an interconnection between the systems, that you can take your data with you, that your data are your data, and that you have a data protection and a consumer protection.
Which is an interesting dynamic, especially because, on the one hand, you have the data privacy that, many countries around the world, such as Germany, really want. But on the other hand, you have a lot of multinationals who see a huge profit potential in all of this data. So it leads to the question, is this data a commodity or human right? And I'll leave that one to you, Secretary Estol.
And I guess we have more questions than answers. Is data, as you were saying, is it a commodity? Is internet a public good? There's all these questions that we have to answer together. I don't think that I have the answer to that question. And the only way to get to those answers is, by brainstorming, by trying to share best practices, by trying to work on what you said, trust is very important. And how do we deal with trust? Trust has been evolving dramatically, especially with the internet and with connectivity, from being local to being institutional, and now people don't trust institutions anymore. Trust is more distributed now. So we're in the presence of a completely new kind of trust, and so we have to be open and to be flexible because we have to adapt to the new challenges that we have every day. So, it's very easy. We have more questions than answers, and that's why we have to work together.
One of the ideas that was proposed in one of our panels was the idea of having a Geneva Convention for this whole digital economy. Secretary Gurría, is that something that you see as, being realistic, first and foremost, and second, necessary?
We're having discussions about how to deal, with privacy, with security, and at the same time, as was mentioned here, how to manage basically something which is considered to be a public good, and at the same time protecting the individual privacy, my name, my life, my issues, my data. And when you think about it, the management of massive amounts of data in order to define policy is precisely what you need, because you can't define policy if you do not have the information. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But just think about what we call the nexus between productivity and inclusion. Why? Because today, in answer to this backlash against globalization, we don't want to think only about growth and productivity, neither do we want to think only about inclusion. We want to do both. But, the digital and the instruments that come with it, including the internet, etc., it's an extraordinary part of that nexus where you can really do both. And the experience of the regulators, wherever, whether you're in consumer business, whether you're in finance business, whether you are in, the regulators are always behind the regulated, okay? We're always running after them. I was a finance minister, and I can tell you. However, when it comes to digital and the internet, etc., they go at ballistic speed, absolutely. They just leave the orbit of the Earth very fast. And therefore, the regulators have to take a very hard choice. Do you go for trying in the traditional way to regulate every single form, every single service, every single way in which you access, go, pay, and have normative precepts, etc.? Or do you go for a broader approach that has to do mostly with principles which allow you to know when there is a breach of the principles, but to not necessarily, you don't necessarily want to be looking after every single aspect and every single one of the actions. And then translate this, which has to do with the regulatory framework, as the Argentinian minister was saying, into the realm of how much regulation still allows you to get the most out of the instrument. Because you really want the instrument to do the most it can, but at the same time, the limits that have to do, precisely with the people, the limits that have to do, how much competition do you want to inject into the process? Well, as much as you want, as much as you can. Can you inject as much, like if you say car factories or whatever you want? Well, it's complex because there is a kind of a winner take most or winner take all, because precisely of the type of product that you're talking about. This can be spread immediately, then you capture a lot of the clientele if you have the right idea. So basically the issues, as the Argentinian minister mentioned, are of different kinds, and they move very fast. You can't, it's not just a standing target that you're looking at. The target is moving so fast that the regulators find it very difficult to catch up, and always, you know, it's a kind of a learning process.
And I have to get Minister Zypries' view on that.
I just wanted to say that it's very usual that if you have a technological development, the regulators is always behind. I mean, that has been the fact with the cars and with trains and everything. I mean, you get a development, and then you have to look at it and see what's happening, and then you have to regulate. That's, I think, very normal. And what I do think, of course, for Europe, it's necessary that we get a European regulation. Like the data protection we decided about at the EU is very necessary. And for the question of regulation, I would like to mention again our platform paper we brought out, and everybody got here, where we have suggestions how to get along with the platform industry, which I think is something special.
And how do you ensure that these regulatory frameworks, for example, that they don't hinder competition? For example, that they don't hinder future growth? Because that's a concern that a lot of people have, is that if you have these regulatory frameworks in place, how do you then change them quick enough?
Well, sometimes you might hinder it, actually. I mean, the development is in a way that the society has to decide in a democratic system, every 4 years again, what do we want, what kind of regulation do we want, and do we really want everything done which is technically possible? That's an ethic debate we have to face and we have to do, and people living together in a social state organization have to decide about it every 4 years.
And a lot of decisions also to be made later today as the ministers' meeting kicks off. A lot of decisions to be made later today as the ministers' meeting kicks off. Before we go, with an eye a little bit on the time, I just want to ask each of our panelists today one final question, and I'll begin with you, Dr. Kituyi. If you had to deliver just one message to the G20, if just one thing could be achieved, what would it be?
I would quote a statement which was made at the UN last November by Jack Ma, the founding chairman of Alibaba, who is also a special envoy of UNCTAD for young entrepreneurs. He said, in history, the first 20 years after a new technology is innovated, it generates rewards for the innovators. The next 30 years belong to entrepreneurs. The information revolution has rewarded innovators the last 20 years. How do we model the benefits that go to enterprise, not to be captured by multinational corporations only, but to reach vulnerable women entrepreneurs, young aspiring tech entrepreneurs, small enterprises? The G20 has the capacity to create an inclusive dialogue, discourse, best practice regime, and indicative legislation that expands the possibilities of which entrepreneurs will benefit in the next wave from the emerging fourth industrial revolution.
Secretary Gurría, what do you think? What is your message to the G20 today?
Use digital as a great accelerator, an accelerator of opportunities, an accelerator of development, an accelerator of equality, an accelerator for gender parity, or parity maybe is the ideal, but certainly reduce the inequalities. An accelerator for closing the gaps between the most and least developed countries, but also for closing the gaps between the least and the less developed groups of population within each one of the countries. To use digital as an accelerator for the quality of life, to use digital to be able to, as the minister said, leapfrog and not have to replicate all the steps that we went through. And then this reference that you made, which is brutal, which is to say accelerator in order to get the 60% that is not yet connected, in order to enjoy the benefits of connectivity and the benefits of the information, the benefits of participating, the benefits of being there. So the message would be very, very strongly, focus on the question, focus on the potential of digital, leverage the digital. Let's agree on the kind of approach that we would like to take towards the issue of regulation without necessarily reducing this enormous potential that digital has in order to improve people's lives.
So those are the messages. Secretary Estol, I'll allow you to respond.
I think that the message would be, there's a saying that says that a parent is only as happy and is as its least happy child. So paraphrasing that and taking into account that globalization and connectivity is blurring the frontiers between countries, I would say that the world is only as rich or as happy as its least developed country. So it's in everybody's interest, again, to work together, to walk the talk, and to achieve, maybe set up as a target, probably we'll never achieve it, but, the problem always is not to set the aim too high and not reach it, but to set it too low and reach it. So I guess we should put high standards and try to get to them. And those 4 billion are definitely a target.
And Minister Zypries, you have the G20 presidency, your leadership, obviously essential over the next 24 hours. What do you make of what has been said?
I fully agree to what Clarisa just said, and I would like to add that we can't find these decisions without the people sitting in the audience, without all the stakeholders. And so thank you very much for joining us today and giving us a lot of input for our G20 ministerial meeting in the evening and tomorrow. That is really helpful, because without you and all the others, we couldn't do that.
Thank you very much, everyone. That concludes our program for the day. It's been a pleasure to be your moderator, and thanks again to Minister Zypries and to our generous host, the German Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy.
And thank you very much for leading us through the day with such a great way. Thank you. Really good. Very good.
Thank you.